John Mercer never thought his life would change because of a simple emergency landing. The day had started like any other. He was an engineer for an interstellar trade company, tasked with inspecting cargo ships traveling between human colonies and allied planets. Routine checks, minor repairs, and occasional diplomacy. It was not glamorous work, but it paid well enough, and John liked the calm of it. That calm shattered when the transgalactic freighter Xylon hit an unexpected gravitational anomaly near a star system called Thyressa. Alarms blared, and the ship shuddered violently. John grabbed the nearest support rail as sparks flew across the control panel. The navigation computer screamed warnings in red, a language almost as alien as the stars themselves. With little time to think, John manually guided the ship toward the only visible landing spot, a glowing planet with forests that shimmered like liquid crystal and cities that floated midair, anchored to the ground with cables of light. The landing was rough, but the freighter touched down without breaking apart. John exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from his brow. The moment he stepped out, he realized this was no ordinary planet. The air was breathable, sweet with the scent of unknown flowers, and the sky was a gradient of violet and turquoise, as if the sun had been painted by an artist with too much imagination. But the beauty was not what struck him first. It was the inhabitants. Thousands of beings, tall and slender with translucent skin that glimmered like starlight, approached. Their movements were graceful, almost as if they floated rather than walked. Their eyes were large, multifaceted, reflecting the colors of their world. They communicated with a series of melodic sounds that resonated in John's chest, almost like music. Before he could even open his mouth, a figure detached from the crowd. She was taller than the others, regal, and carried herself with a presence that made John feel both insignificant and strangely calm. Her hair, if it could be called that, flowed around her head like ribbons of living light. Her eyes, larger than any human eyes, seemed to pierce straight into his thoughts. "You have arrived," she said in perfect English. The voice was soft, but it carried authority that made him straighten involuntarily. "I am Queen Celera, ruler of Thyressa. You are our guest." John blinked. English? How was that possible? He had not activated the ship's universal translator, yet somehow he understood her perfectly. Before he could formulate a proper response, she gestured toward the gathering crowd. "Join us. There is a ceremony," Celera commanded. John hesitated. He had no idea what the ceremony was. He had landed on a strange planet, surrounded by beings who could probably see through his thoughts, and now he was being asked to participate in an event he didn't understand. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to retreat to the freighter, but something in the Queen's eyes made him step forward instead. The crowd parted like water, forming a pathway that led John to a large platform made of what appeared to be glowing crystal. The surface was smooth but solid, reflecting his human form in fractured patterns of light. On the platform, symbols were etched into the crystal, pulsing rhythmically as if alive. "You are to participate in the Bond of Stars," one of the attendants explained, her melodic voice echoing in John's mind more than in his ears. "It is the highest honor, it is permanent, it is sacred." John frowned. "Wait, what? I don't understand. Bond of Stars." I think you've got the wrong person. I'm just—" Before he could finish, Celera approached, holding a device that resembled a crown but was made entirely of interwoven light strands. She placed it over his head, and a warm sensation spread through him like the planet itself was reaching inside his mind. "You are now bound," she said simply. John froze. His heart raced. He opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The crowd erupted in soft, melodic cheers. Around him, the air shimmered with energy, and he felt a strange connection to every being present. Something fundamental had changed, though he didn't yet understand what. This isn't a—" John's protests were drowned by the ceremonial music, the vibration of instruments made of pure light, resonating through the air and the crystal beneath his feet. Queen Celera smiled. It was gentle, yet there was a weight to it that made John realize there was no reversing this. "Not now, not ever. You have joined me," Celera said. "As consort, you will share my life, my responsibilities, and my world. Fear not, human. You are here for a purpose, greater than even you can comprehend." John's mind spun. Responsibilities? World? He barely understood how to operate the freighter's autopilot. How was he supposed to navigate an alien government? And yet, as he looked at the Queen, there was a strange sense of trust in her eyes, and a flicker of something human, A shared curiosity, a recognition of intelligence, passed between them. For hours, John was led through the ceremonial rituals. He was bathed in lights that changed color with his emotions, his thoughts projected briefly in holographic patterns for the crowd to see. Every gesture, every word, had layers of meaning he couldn't begin to grasp. And every time he tried to protest, Celera would place a hand on his shoulder, her presence calm and reassuring, reminding him silently that he had no choice but to adapt. As night fell, or what passed for night on a planet with two suns, John was given quarters in the floating palace, a structure that defied physics, hovering above a forest of crystal trees. He sat on a bed that molded perfectly to his body, staring at the city below. The lights of thousands of Lumary homes sparkled like stars scattered across the surface. And he realized something terrifying. He was alone, except for beings who considered him bound by law and ritual. He was stuck on an alien world, married to a queen whose customs he barely understood, with no immediate way back to Earth. Yet in the depths of his panic, a small part of him stirred with excitement. The Lumary had technology he could scarcely imagine. Their cities floated without visible supports. Their instruments could manipulate energy, matter, and even the mind in ways Earth science had not yet approached. And here he was, a human, standing in the middle of it all, with a chance to learn, survive, and maybe, just maybe, leave a mark. The next morning, John woke to find Celera waiting outside his quarters. Her radiant hair shimmered in the light, casting reflections across the walls. "You slept well," she said. "Today you will see the duties of your new role." "What duties?" John asked, though he already guessed the answer would be overwhelming. "You are to learn, to observe, to understand, and soon to act," Celera replied, her eyes softened. "I will teach you. Fear is natural, curiosity is essential, courage is optional but highly recommended." They walked together through the palace, which seemed alive. The walls pulsed with energy, responding to movement and thought. Displays of data floated in the air, showing the health of the planet, the flow of resources, and the activities of thousands of Lumary citizens. John tried to absorb it all, but it was impossible. Each screen was a puzzle, each diagram a language of logic and emotion intertwined. Celera introduced him to her council, a group of Lumary elders, each radiating authority and wisdom. They scrutinized John with polite curiosity. Some were impressed with his calm under pressure, others skeptical of his abilities. One elder even chuckled, a soft sound like wind chimes at his hesitation. "Your species is strange," the elder said. "Yet you have survived the bond, that is rare." John could only nod. He felt like a child suddenly thrust into a university lecture he didn't sign up for, but he also felt a strange thrill. He had survived space travel, gravitational anomalies, and now an alien wedding. Surely he could survive a little political observation. Days passed. John learned quickly that the Lumary valued creativity, empathy, and quick thinking, though in ways that differed from humans. When a supply imbalance threatened a district, he suggested a solution using Earth-style logistics and simple machines, which solved the problem in hours instead of weeks. The council murmured in approval. Celera looked at him with a mixture of pride and amusement. John began to realize that his human traits, flaws, quirks, and all, were not liabilities here. In fact, they were advantages. While the Lumary were brilliant, their reliance on tradition sometimes blinded them to unconventional solutions. A human with no training and no fear of breaking tradition could see possibilities they could not. Still, John missed Earth. He missed the familiar smell of coffee, the sound of rain against a roof, the messy chaos of human life. But for now, survival and adaptation were paramount. He would need all his wits if he hoped to navigate court intrigue, alien politics, and the ever-present expectation of his role as consort. And little did he know, this accidental marriage was only the beginning. Even as John began to adjust, a shadow loomed beyond the borders of Thyressa. Reports arrived of a militant faction, known as the Crimson Tide, stirring unrest and planning an attack. The council debated strategy while John listened, absorbing data faster than any Lumary could imagine. His mind, trained in human engineering and problem-solving, began to connect dots the council hadn't even considered. Queen Celera noticed. She approached him privately. "You see things differently," she said, a slight smile touching her lips. "Do not underestimate yourself, John. Humanity has potential the galaxy often overlooks. I hope you will show it here." John swallowed. Show humanity's potential. On a planet where he was an outsider, barely able to understand the language, culture, or even the rules of marriage. Yet, despite fear, excitement sparked in him. He was, in his own small way, ready to rise to the challenge. For now, though, all he could do was survive the lessons, the ceremonies, and the subtle power games of an alien court. And in doing so, he would discover that being human, flawed, stubborn, clever, was a strength more powerful than he had ever imagined. And so John Mercer, accidental consort, human engineer, and soon-to-be unlikely hero, stepped into his new life. The planet of Thyressa was beautiful, alien, and dangerous, but John was ready. For better or worse, his world, and perhaps all human worlds, would never be the same again. John Mercer had barely adjusted to the dazzling beauty and strange customs of Thyressa when the reality of his situation hit him harder than any emergency landing ever could. The ceremonial glow of the palace lights and the ethereal melodies that had first overwhelmed him now felt like chains, reminding him that he was no longer just an observer. He was a consort, bound by alien law, and every decision, no matter how small, carried consequences. Queen Celara had begun involving him more actively in palace affairs. Every morning, he was summoned to the council chamber, a vast dome of translucent crystal that hovered high above the forests, with staircases made of light curving into the sky. Inside, the council members awaited him, their expressions polite but calculating. They asked questions about Earth, human inventions, and problem-solving methods. Some questions were practical. How would he approach energy distribution, resource management, or transportation? Others were less tangible. How did humans build trust, lead people, or resolve disputes? John often found himself pausing. It was one thing to design machines. It was entirely another to advise a species whose social structures were as complex as their biology. And yet he surprised even himself. Drawing on Earth's history and human ingenuity, he suggested strategies that, though unconventional by Lumery standards, solved long-standing problems. One day, a council member named Alaris presented a map of Thyressa's floating districts. "A supply imbalance in the northern sector has worsened," she said. "Your perspective, John Mercer, may offer a solution." John studied the map, noticing patterns the Lumery had ignored. "If you redirect the primary energy conduits to temporarily boost local transport nodes, supplies can reach the northern sector twice as fast," he suggested. "Then, stagger the distribution schedules so that districts with surplus energy contribute proportionally." "It's simple and efficient," the council murmured in approval. Alaris's eyes widened in surprise. Celera's gaze met his, a quiet acknowledgement of his growing value. For the first time, John felt a small surge of pride. Perhaps he could do more than survive, perhaps he could help. But his human perspective was not always welcomed. Some council members whispered behind closed doors. His unconventional ideas challenged traditions that had lasted thousands of Thyressan years. Some feared that a human, untrained in their customs, might destabilize the palace's delicate balance. John sensed the tension, but refused to let it intimidate him. Celara, noticing his determination, invited him to walk with her one evening across the city. They floated above the bioluminescent forest in a small hover platform, the wind, or whatever passed for wind here, rushing past them. The lights of Thyressa stretched beneath them like stars fallen to the ground. "You are different from our usual consorts," Celara said. "They are trained to follow, to observe, to agree. You think, you question, you act, and it works." John rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't mean to be different. I'm just me. I don't know your ways. I can't pretend I understand all of this." Celara smiled, though her eyes remained serious. "And that is exactly why you are valuable. Humanity has a quality many species lack. You see solutions where we see only tradition. You act without fear of breaking rules. That is strength. And soon, Thyressa will need strength more than ever." John frowned. "Strength? What do you mean?" Before Celara could answer, a messenger arrived, floating swiftly on a stream of light. The crystalline wings of its uniform shimmered as it bowed. "Your Majesty," it said, "there are reports of Crimson Tide activity near the eastern border. They have mobilized forces and are advancing toward the floating districts." Celara's expression hardened. "They are bold and reckless." She turned to John. "It seems your education in politics and strategy begins earlier than expected." Over the next days, John immersed himself in the palace's defense planning. He watched how the Lumeri moved troops, how they managed energy shields, and how their intelligence networks operated. Every system was elegant, precise, and efficient, but often rigid. Where the Lumeri saw constraints, John saw opportunity. He suggested creating decoy energy nodes to confuse potential attackers and using lightweight drones to relay messages faster than traditional communication circuits. The council was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to implement his ideas on a small scale. When the Crimson Tide approached, the initial defense proved far more effective than the council had anticipated. During one skirmish, John witnessed Lumeri soldiers, armed with energy weapons that emitted pulses of controlled light, moving in perfect formation. He realized that while their technology was superior, it relied heavily on conformity. One human mind, willing to think differently, could change outcomes dramatically. But John was not just learning about war. He was learning about Celera. Her strength, intelligence, and empathy impressed him daily. She didn't rule with fear. She ruled with understanding, balancing diplomacy and authority. John saw glimpses of vulnerability beneath her regal exterior, a loneliness, a weight of responsibility that no one, not even the council, could share. And slowly, he found himself admiring her not just as a ruler, but as a being who had entrusted her people, and now him, to a future he barely understood. Yet the Crimson Tide loomed ever closer. Intelligence reports indicated that they were not merely rebels. They were highly organized and armed with technology stolen or repurposed from Lumeri designs. The threat was real, immediate, and dangerous. John knew he could not simply rely on Lumeri methods to defend the planet. He began designing contingency plans using principles from Earth's military strategies, mixing them with Lumeri technology. One plan involved creating energy corridors that could redirect enemy attacks harmlessly into uninhabited areas. Another utilized the floating cities themselves, repositioning them strategically to create natural barriers and confuse invaders. Celera watched him work tirelessly, offering guidance when needed but mostly giving him space to innovate. "You will need more than ingenuity," she warned one night. "You will need courage, leadership, and the ability to inspire others. Are you ready?" John hesitated. He had never led anyone beyond a small engineering team, and now he faced the impossible task of protecting an alien world. Yet, despite the fear, he felt a strange determination rise within him. He couldn't fail, not for Celera, not for the Lumeri, and perhaps, in a way he barely understood, not for humanity. The first major engagement came sooner than expected. Crimson Tide forces had breached one of the eastern districts, and panic spread among the citizens. John, Celera, and a group of trusted council members coordinated the defense from the palace's central hub. Using his combined knowledge of human logic and Lumeri technology, John directed countermeasures, creating safe passages for civilians while isolating the invaders. The battle was chaotic, lights flashing across the sky, energy pulses echoing like distant thunder. Yet John's strategies worked. What could have been a catastrophic defeat turned into a managed retreat, minimizing casualties and giving Celera's forces time to regroup. After the battle, John felt both exhaustion and exhilaration. He had survived, adapted, and contributed meaningfully to the defense of a planet he had stumbled upon by accident. For the first time, he began to feel that his accidental marriage might have a purpose beyond mere survival. As days turned into weeks, John's presence became increasingly respected by the Lumeri. Citizens admired the human who could solve problems others deemed impossible. Soldiers sought his advice. Even council members who had doubted him began to acknowledge the value of an outsider's perspective. Despite these successes, John never lost his humanity. He still missed Earth, the messy, unpredictable world where failures were forgiven and successes celebrated with laughter and coffee. But here, he found new reasons to persevere. He was not just surviving. He was learning, growing, and discovering that human creativity and courage could shine even among the stars. Celera, too, noticed the change. She invited John to join her in council meetings as a full participant, rather than a mere observer. "You are no longer just my consort," she said quietly. "You are my partner, your voice matters here." John felt a mix of pride and fear. He had never expected to hold such responsibility. And yet, as he looked around the council chamber, he realized that humanity had something unique to offer: intuition, adaptability, and resilience, traits that could tip the scales in moments of crisis. The days grew tense as intelligence indicated that the Crimson Tide was preparing a major offensive, larger and more coordinated than any prior attack. Thyressa faced its greatest test yet, and John knew the coming battle would demand every ounce of strategy, courage, and creativity he could muster. Late one night, alone on a balcony overlooking the glowing forests, John reflected on how much had changed. He had arrived on Thyressa by accident. He had been thrust into a marriage he never intended. Yet, through confusion, fear, and adaptation, he had begun to make a difference. He realized that humanity's strength was not in brute force or advanced technology alone, but in the ability to adapt, to think differently, and to act when others hesitated. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Solara joined him, her hair casting shimmering patterns on the balcony. "The galaxy often underestimates humanity," she said. "But you prove them wrong, and perhaps together we can protect Thyressa and show the universe that humans are more than what they appear." John nodded, a determined smile forming. "Then let's make sure this planet and our people survive. We've got work to do." As they looked out at the forests and the floating cities, John felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. But for the first time, he did not feel alone. He had Solara, the Lumary, and his own human ingenuity, and he knew that whatever came next, he would face it head-on. Thyressa's future, and perhaps the place of humanity among the stars, depended on it. And so, John Mercer, accidental consort, human engineer, and now strategic advisor, prepared for the challenge that would define his life. The Crimson Tide was coming, and the fate of Thyressa hung in the balance. But John was ready. For the first time, he felt that being human, clever, resourceful, and brave was not just enough. It was essential. The day of the Crimson Tide's attack dawned with a strange calm over Thyressa. The violet and turquoise sky shimmered as the two suns rose, casting long reflections across the floating cities. To any casual observer, it was a beautiful morning, the kind that made the planet appear untouched and serene. But John Mercer knew better. Every shadow, every shimmer of light in the forests below could hide enemy forces. He stood beside Queen Solara on the balcony of the central palace, overlooking the city's defensive formations. Lumary soldiers moved with precision, energy shields humming as they adjusted to the anticipated attacks. Floating drones flitted between the districts, scanning and relaying data. The palace's central hub displayed real-time information about troop positions, energy flows, and population safety metrics. "This is it," John said quietly. "Everything we've planned comes down to today. If the Crimson Tide breaches the eastern sectors, it could cascade into the entire network." Solara's expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed concern. "They are dangerous, yes, but you have taught our people to think differently, to adapt. Thyressa has more chance now than it ever did before. And you are ready, John." John swallowed. Ready or not, the responsibility weighed on him like a gravity he could not escape. Yet deep inside, he felt a flicker of confidence. He had studied the enemy's patterns, adapted strategies from Earth's history, and integrated them with Lumary technology. Today would be the test of human ingenuity against the forces of chaos. The first wave of the Crimson Tide struck just as the suns reached their zenith. Ships armed with stolen Lumary energy weapons descended from the sky in perfect formation. Ground units moved swiftly through the forests, their movements coordinated and precise. Yet they were unprepared for the strategies John had devised. Energy corridors redirected incoming attacks harmlessly into empty forest sectors. Decoy nodes created false targets, confusing the enemy sensors. Floating platforms were shifted subtly, creating barriers and corridors that the invaders had not anticipated. What should have been a straightforward attack turned into chaos for the Crimson Tide. John moved from console to console, issuing instructions and adjusting parameters. He felt the thrill of engagement, the rush of thinking 10 steps ahead while managing multiple variables. Every success, every correct prediction brought a surge of hope. "Human strategies are unconventional," one elder whispered to Solara, "yet effective." Solara nodded, her eyes never leaving John. "Sometimes the galaxy underestimates humanity," she said. "But today we see why they should not." As the battle intensified, John realized that physical strength alone would not win the day. The Crimson Tide's technology rivaled the Lumari, and their numbers were significant. Victory depended on creativity, adaptability, and morale, areas where humans excelled. He instructed the drone units to deploy in unexpected formations, mimicking patterns seen in Earth's swarm tactics. Energy shields were rotated in sequences unfamiliar to Lumari doctrine, creating confusion and hesitation among the attackers. Small teams of Lumari soldiers, guided by John's instructions, used terrain and gravity manipulation to funnel enemy units into controlled zones. Celera led the central forces with grace and precision, coordinating attacks and maintaining civilian safety. Occasionally, she glanced at John, a silent acknowledgement of the human mind that had changed the tide of battle. Their partnership was no longer accidental. It was strategic, effective, and perhaps even essential. Hours passed, though time felt distorted under the pressure of combat. Energy pulses lit the sky, explosions shook the ground, and the sound of alarms echoed across the city. Yet through it all, John's plans worked. The Crimson Tide, confident in their numerical advantage, found themselves struggling against solutions they could not anticipate. Then came the final assault. A massive enemy ship descended directly toward the central palace, energy beams cutting through the air like lightning. The council panicked briefly, but John acted quickly. Using a combination of Earth-style mechanics and Lumari energy manipulation, he devised a countermeasure, a redirection grid that would use the palace's own energy to deflect the attack. Celera raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain?" John nodded. "It's risky, but if it works, it will neutralize their main strike and protect the civilians." Energy pulsed along the grid, bending light and force around the palace. The massive beam from the Crimson Tide collided with the field and split harmlessly into the surrounding skies. Cheers erupted from the city, and John felt a momentary surge of triumph. The ground forces of the Crimson Tide, demoralized by the failure of their main assault, faltered. Lumari units, guided by John's adaptive strategies, pressed forward, reclaiming territory efficiently and minimizing casualties. The battle, once teetering on disaster, shifted firmly in Thyresa's favor. By nightfall, the Crimson Tide had been forced to retreat. Their remaining forces scattered, leaving the planet temporarily safe. The citizens of Thyresa celebrated, their voices resonating in the crystalline structures of the city. John Mercer, the accidental consort, had played a pivotal role in defending an entire world. Celera summoned John to the palace's balcony, where the lights of the city shimmered like 1,000 stars. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have done what few could. Thyresa owes you more than words can express." John smiled, though he felt the exhaustion in every muscle. "I just did what anyone would do, I think, tried to solve problems, but I couldn't have done it without you, your leadership, and your people." Celera's gaze softened. "And yet your perspective was what tipped the balance. Human ingenuity has saved this world today. You should be proud." For the first time, John felt a profound sense of belonging. He was still an outsider, a human in an alien world, but he had contributed in ways that mattered. His mistakes had turned into victories. His curiosity, adaptability, and courage had made a difference. Over the following weeks, John helped implement reforms to strengthen Thyresa's defenses, improve resource distribution, and integrate human-style problem-solving with Lumari technology. The council, initially hesitant, embraced his ideas, recognizing that humans offered unique qualities that complemented Lumari strengths. The experience transformed not only Thyresa, but also John. He had arrived as an accidental consort, unsure of his place and terrified of the unknown. Now, he was a respected advisor, a strategist, and a symbol of humanity's potential in the galaxy. Citizens began to approach him openly, asking questions, seeking guidance, and showing appreciation. Children would mimic his gestures as he explained strategies in simplified forms, and soldiers respected his insights on logistics and tactics. Even the elders who had doubted him at first now acknowledged the human who had saved Thyresa. Despite all the praise, John remained humble. He never forgot that he was far from home and that Earth, with its chaotic beauty, still called to him. But he understood that this accidental marriage had changed the trajectory of his life, and perhaps the destiny of his species. One evening, as John and Celera walked along the palace's floating terraces, he asked, "Do you think humans could help in other worlds the way we helped Thyressa?" Celera looked out over the glowing forests. "They already have, but Thyressa was a start. Your species has courage, creativity, and resilience. Those qualities, when combined with knowledge and unity, can shape the galaxy. Today, you proved it." John felt a warmth spread through him. He had never imagined that a mistake, a ceremony he did not understand, a marriage he had not chosen, would lead to this. He had discovered that being human, with all its imperfections, was a strength the universe often underestimated. Months passed, and life on Thyressa began to stabilize. The Crimson Tide had been driven back to distant systems, and peace settled over the floating cities. John continued his work, teaching humans unique methods of thinking, problem-solving, and innovation to the Lumery. Bridges were built between cultures, and plans were made to establish formal relations between Thyressa and Earth. Celera invited John to join diplomatic missions to other systems, recognizing that his perspective could prevent conflicts before they began and offer innovative solutions to challenges that seemed impossible. John accepted, realizing that his accidental wedding had become a gateway to experiences he never dreamed possible. As he stood on the observation deck of the palace, looking at the horizon where the suns dipped behind the crystalline forests, John felt a sense of wonder. He had survived a new world, navigated an alien culture, defended a planet against insurmountable odds, and discovered that human qualities, creativity, courage, and adaptability, were as valuable in the stars as they were on Earth. Celera joined him silently, her hand brushing his. "Your world may have changed, John," she said softly, "but so has ours, and together perhaps we can change many others." John smiled, a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction on his face. "Then let's make sure we do it right," he said. "For Thyressa, for humans, for everyone." As the stars emerged in the sky, reflecting in the floating rivers and shimmering forests, John realized that life would never be the same. Not just because he had married an alien queen, but because he had learned that humanity, in its simplest and most genuine form, could shine brighter than any star. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown challenges, strange civilizations, and dangerous possibilities. But John Mercer had discovered the truth. Being human meant more than survival. It meant adaptation, ingenuity, and the courage to face the impossible. And for the first time, he felt ready to do exactly that. Thyressa had survived. Humanity had shown its strength. And John, the accidental consort, had found his place among the stars, proving that sometimes mistakes lead to the most extraordinary destinies. The adventure was far from over, but for now, John allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The planet glowed below, the citizens cheered, and he knew one thing for certain. The universe would never forget the day a human engineer accidentally married an alien queen, and in doing so, changed the fate of a world.